From Manila to the globe, this is World Newsfeed, bringing you the biggest stories shaping our times. Good morning, I'm Raine Musñgi. Let's dive into the headlines making a global impact. We start with a story close to home where South Korea's acting president Han Duck-soo moved on Sunday to reassure the country's allies and calm financial markets a day after President Yoon Suk-yeol was impeached and suspended from his duties over a martial law attempt. A statement from his office said Han said South Korea will carry out its foreign and security policies without disruption and strive to ensure the South Korea-U.S. alliance is maintained and developed.
지금 무엇보다 중요한 것은
The most important of all now is that there should be no vacuum in state affairs. We will establish a strong security posture and manage trust on foreign affairs in a stable manner. The entire cabinet will do its best to maintain trust between South Korea and the United States, and between South Korea, the United States and Japan, and other allies.
In a further attempt to stabilize the Asian nation's leadership, the main opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung told reporters the party would not seek to impeach Han for his involvement in Yoon's December 3 martial law decision, but that Yoon should be removed from office as soon as possible.
We are restraining. However, rather than celebrating the victory ourselves and being scattered, shouldn't we continue to fight together to ensure that there is a swift and serious accountability to be held and ensure the removal of Yoon Suk-yeol as soon as possible?
저는 오늘의 결과를 대단히 무겁게
Prosecutors said Yoon did not appear on Sunday morning in response to a summons for questioning in a criminal investigation into his martial law decision, and they promised to issue another order. Yoon and a number of senior officials face potential charges of insurrection, abuse of authority, and obstructing people from exercising their rights. Yoon vowed not to give up and said he would do his best until the last minute for the country.
저는 결코 포기하지 않겠습니다.
I will never give up. I will do my best for the country until the last minute, taking reprimand, encouragement, and support for me in mind. I am frustrated all the efforts so far will be in vain.
Meanwhile, Seoul residents were divided on Sunday after South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol was impeached in a second vote on Saturday by the opposition-led parliament over short-lived attempt to impose martial law, a move that shocked the nation. Illustrating the divisions, Jo Sung-woo, who supported the impeachment, said he was relieved by the impeachment.
탄핵소추안이 가결돼서
Since it's literally acting president, I hope Han Duck-soo will exercise the minimum power to operate the country stably, rather than actively be involved in state affairs.
In contrast, Yoon supporter Im Jong-suk was saddened by the news.
As a citizen, I'm really sad that the impeachment motion was passed. I really can't stand to see these illegal lawmakers who were elected by fraudulent elections making evil laws, and now this huge opposition party is running wild on their own.
South Korea's Prime Minister and acting President Han Duck-soo convened his cabinet and National Security Council shortly after Saturday's impeachment vote. He vowed to maintain military readiness to prevent any breach of national security. Yonhap News Agency said Han spoke by phone with the commander of U.S. forces in Korea, expressing concern about the possibility North Korea could attempt military provocations, such as launching ballistic missiles or cyber attacks. Han's office also said U.S. President Joe Biden told Han the ironclad U.S.-South Korea alliance remained unchanged, and Washington would work with Seoul to further develop and strengthen the alliance, as well as trilateral cooperation, including neighbor Japan.
I call on military to recognize the seriousness of the current situation and establish a joint defense posture under close cooperation between the United States and South Korea, and further strengthen its surveillance and alert posture against North Korea's provocations.
And on events in South Korea and President Yoon. Look, I think the most important thing is that the Republic of Korea has demonstrated its democratic resilience. We've seen it follow peacefully a process laid out in its constitution. And we're ready to work with President Han as he assumes office. Most important, we strongly support the Korean people. We strongly support the ironclad alliance that joins our two countries together and that's done so much over the last few years.
Korean Kospi Index, or Korean shares, rose for a fourth straight session Friday on hopes that the political uncertainty would ease after the impeachment vote in Parliament, which followed a failed vote the week earlier. Democratic Party leader Lee said the most pressuring issue is a slump in consumption caused by insufficient domestic demand and the government's reduction of its fiscal role. South Korea's financial authorities vowed on Sunday to act as needed to stabilize markets, while the finance minister said he would announce an economic policy by year's end. Meanwhile, as South Korea's constitutional court started a process to deliberate a parliamentary decision to impeach President Yoon over his botched martial law declaration, analysts questioned Yoon Suk-yeol's foreign policy as president. Constitutional Court Acting Chief Moon Hyung-bae convened a meeting of judges Monday, vowing to conduct a swift and fair trial. The court now has 180 days to decide whether to approve the parliament's decision, a development that can trigger an early snap presidential election. Analysts have warned that Yoon's impeachment is unlikely to end the political turmoil, but they hope a quick impeachment process so that South Korea could reinstate diplomatic relationship with major countries.
It's okay if we are having good diplomatic relationship with Japan, but neglecting other countries like China or Russia, because we need to diversify the diplomatic relationship with other countries. When the impeachment is accepted by the Constitutional Court, then as soon as they decide that and pass the decision, then we can have the election within 60 days of to elect a new president. But as you know that the U.S. Trump will be gain the government,
right?
And we need to deal with all these new leaders globally. We have to be very prepared because all the other countries are, preparing for the next government. We hope that this impeachment process can be settled very quickly, and we have a new president so that we can reinstate the diplomatic relationship with all these global leaders.
When you hear testimony that somebody was ordered to drag the legislatures out of the parliament so that they could not vote, that will be very persuasive evidence that this was not simply a president acting on behalf of the best interests of the country.
If the Constitution Court does make the decision based on legal argument rather political sort of consideration, I would say in the final analysis, the democracy in South Korea is working. Having said that, I don't think the problem in South Korea is a problem of democracy. Rather, as I said, is democracy, democratic means or institutions, how they are being used for good or for political or personal interest of these politicians.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that Moscow had started involving a noticeable number of North Korean troops in its efforts to drive Ukrainian troops out of Russia's Kursk region. Zelenskyy said the North Korean troops' participation in operations in the region, which borders Ukraine, amounted to a new escalation in the nearly 34-month-old war. He said Ukraine would continue to defend itself, including against the North Korean troops. Ukrainian and South Korean officials have previously said that more than 10,000 North Korean troops were already in Russia. Zelenskyy issued a fresh appeal to Ukraine's Western allies to strengthen their support for Kyiv, saying that he would discuss it with European partners next week.
Russia drew one more country into this war to the fullest extent. If this is not considered to be escalation, then what is escalation which so many people talked about? It is Putin who makes steps that expand and prolong this war. It is him who pushes back the possibility of peace. He wants to add more problems for the world and Asia. That's why Russians are teaching modern war to North Korea.
In another development, Ukraine's SBU security service said it had launched an operation to destroy 40 rail cars carrying fuel to Russian troops in an area of the Zaporizhzhia region that Moscow holds in southern Ukraine. It says the locomotive and 40 tanker cars were destroyed, and an important rail line used to supply Russian troops was taken out of service for an extended period. Meanwhile, a Russian oil tanker carrying thousands of tons of oil products split apart during a heavy storm on Sunday, spilling oil into the Kerch Strait, while another tanker was also in distress after the sustaining damage. Russia's investigators opened 2 criminal cases to look into possible safety violations after at least one person was killed when the 136-meter Volodymyr 212 tanker with 15 people on board split in half, with its bow sinking. A second Russian flagship, the 132-meter Volodymyr 239, was drifting after sustaining damage. It has a crew of 14 people and was built in 1973. Russia said more than 50 people and equipment, including Mi-8 helicopters and rescue tugboats, had been deployed to the area. Well, Russian activity was observed on Sunday at the Hmeim air base in the Syrian port city of Latakia, 1 week after the fall of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Syrian military and security forces in contact with the Russians told Reuters that Moscow was pulling back its forces from the front lines and withdrawing some heavy equipment and senior Syrian officers. But the sources who spoke on condition of anonymity due to the sensitivity of the situation, said Russia was not pulling out of its 2 main bases and currently had no intention of doing so. The bases in Syria are an integral part of Russia's global military presence. The Tartus naval base is Russia's only Mediterranean repair and resupply hub, while the Hmeimim, a major staging post for military and mercenary activity in Africa. Britain has had diplomatic contact with the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS group, that swift ousted Syrian President al-Assad from power last week. British Foreign Minister David Lammy said on Sunday, HTS remains a proscribed organization with whom they can have diplomatic contact using diplomatic intelligence channels available.
We want to see chemical weapons stockpiles secured and not used, and we want to ensure that there is not continuing violence. They remain a proscribed organization. This was an organization that came out of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is responsible for a tremendous loss of life on British soil. We will judge them by their actions. I won't comment on future prescription, but of course we recognize that this is an important moment for Syria. There's huge hope on the streets in Syria, and by signing up to the ACBA principles, we are signing up to an inclusive opportunity that is Syrian-led and Syrian-owned.
Earlier this weekend, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that Washington also has had contact with the HTS. Meanwhile, the UK also announced a $63 million aid package to help vulnerable Syrians after rebels last week's change of government. Millions of Syrians need humanitarian assistance of food, shelter, emergency health care, and protection after more than a decade of civil war that shattered much of the country's infrastructure and displaced large numbers of people. In a statement, Britain said that money, mostly distributed through UN channels, will support emerging needs of the Syrians, such as water, hospitals, and schools. A Qatari delegation arrived in Damascus to pave the way for the reopening of Qatar's embassy in Syria. As signs of normalcy return to Syria, Qatar also announced a return of diplomatic relations since its embassy in Damascus has been shut since July 2011, when it withdrew its ambassador from Damascus after a series of deadly crackdowns by Assad's regime on street protesters. It's violence that led to the 13-year-long civil war. Schools in Damascus reopened for students on Sunday with a flag adopted by Syria's new ruler raised in the schoolyard amid cheering students and teachers. Syrian Orthodox Christians in the port city of Latakia attended Sunday Mass on December 15th for the first time since the dramatic overthrow of Assad. It's an early test of assurances by the new Islamist rulers that the rights of minorities will be protected. The religious leadership expressed concerns over the chaos following the regime's fall, describing the collapse of state institutions as leaving the street to the rabble.
Before the fall of the regime, nothing prevented us from practicing our faith as Christians. I don't know the situation for other sects, but as Christians, life was very comfortable, and we faced no problems at all. Our prayers and worship, whether in the evening, night, or morning, were never restricted. We only paused that day, but with the reassurances we've been receiving, God willing, we will resume as we did before. God willing, we will hold on to this and ensure nothing changes for us because we are all one people. We, Muslims, Christians, Alawites, Druze, are all Syrians.
Israeli troops operating in the UN-monitored buffer zone between Syria and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights on Sunday after Syria's de facto leader said the country was not interested in new conflicts despite Israeli attacks. Syria's de facto leader Ahmad al-Shara said on Saturday that Israel was using false pretexts to justify its attacks on Syria. But Shara, better known as Abu Mohammed al-Golani, said he's not interested in engaging in new conflicts as the country focuses on rebuilding. Several Arab countries, including Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Jordan, have condemned what they called Israel's seizure of a buffer zone in the Golan Heights. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump about developments in Syria and a recent push to secure the release of Israeli and foreign hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. Netanyahu said Israeli actions in Syria were intended to prevent further threats from other elements. Israel also planned to double its population on the occupied Golan Heights. In 2019, then President Donald Trump declared U.S. support for Israeli sovereignty over the Golan, but the annexation has not been recognized by most countries. Netanyahu's office said the government unanimously approved more than $11 million in a plan to encourage demographic growth in the Golan. Some 31,000 Israelis have already settled there.
I remind you that for decades Syria was a proactive enemy state to Israel. It attacked us again and again. It allowed others to attack us from its territory. It allowed Iran to arm Hezbollah through its territory. To ensure that what happened will not happen again, we have taken a series of strong actions in the last few days. Together with Defense Minister Katz, I instructed the IDF to thwart the potential threats from Syria and to prevent the takeover of terrorist elements near our border.
Israeli military strikes across Gaza Strip killed at least 28 Palestinians, including a journalist and rescue workers, medics said. And the Israeli military said troops carried out air and ground attacks in the northern Gaza Strip, killing dozens of militants while capturing others. Medics and fellow journalists said an Israeli airstrike hit the civil emergency center in the Nuseirat market area in the central Gaza Strip. It killed Ahmed Al-Lu, a video journalist for Al Jazeera TV, and 5 other people. Another airstrike hit a group of Hamas-linked men tasked with protecting aid trucks west of Gaza City. Residents said at least 11 people were killed in 3 separate Israeli airstrikes on Gaza City houses when clusters were bombed or set ablaze and 2 were killed by drone fire in Rafah. The Israeli military said the 3 Gaza City houses belonged to militants planning imminent attacks. It said steps were being taken to mitigate the risk of harming civilians beforehand. But Gaza-based health authorities say the Palestinian death toll from ongoing Israeli attacks in the Gaza Strip has risen to almost 45,000, with over 106,000 others reported injured since October last year. We're taking a breather, the final stretch of the program in a moment. Stay on BNC for your World Newsfeed.
This is The Scorecard,
where you score the latest sports news
and in-depth views. I'm Anton Rojas.
I'm Erica Christensen.
Get ready. Be prepared. Get to the latest stories, updates, and reports about what's happening in the world of sports. Hosted by Anton Rojas, Erica Christensen.
Where sports is our business and business is our sport.
The Scorecard, 9:30 p.m. on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Welcome back to World Newsfeed. Cyclone Chido swept through the French Indian Ocean archipelago of Mayotte Sunday. Several hundred people and possibly even thousands may have been killed when the most powerful cyclone in nearly a century hit the islands. Météo France said winds of more than 200 kilometers per hour flattened homes, damaged government buildings and a hospital, and overturned containers. Authorities say it was difficult to ascertain the precise death toll after the cyclone, which also raised concerns about access to food, water, and sanitation, and Muslims will bury their dead immediately, making it harder to count the real number of deaths. Rescue personnel were dispatched to help pick up debris from homes and trees that now litter the roads. Located nearly 8,000 kilometers from Paris and a 4-day trip by sea, Mayotte is significantly poorer than the rest of France.
C'est extrêmement difficile à dire. Je pense qu'il y aura certainement plusieurs centaines.
It's extremely difficult to say. I think there will certainly be several hundreds, perhaps approaching 1,000, or even a few thousands. But it is obvious that, given the violence of this event, we all experienced it in our flesh, in our family, with our loved ones, our colleagues. I was myself at the command center with all my colleagues. The ceiling of the operational center flew away. We found ourselves facing the storm. Like each of us, we experienced this event. Inevitably, there is a much higher count. We will try to do the count because it is obviously up to us to draw up this toll.
Meanwhile, Pope Francis was warmly welcomed by the Corsican people during the first recorded visit by a pontiff to the French Mediterranean island. During a brief ride in an open-air Pope-mobile from the airport, the Pope waved at crowds on the street of Ajaccio. He appeared in good form despite the small bruise on his shin, the result of what the Vatican described as a minor fall in his bedroom last week. Francis also celebrated a Catholic Mass, exhorting the Corsicans to have babies. He congratulated them on the many children he saw on the French island, calling the Ukrainian children who forgot the smile because of the war. Francis also turned his thoughts to the elderly too, urging them not to leave them alone. Pope Francis held talks with French President Emmanuel Macron also on Sunday before wrapping up that visit at Corsica's capital. The Vatican estimates that about 81% of Corsica's population of 356,000 is Catholic. There are 83 priests on the island and some 30 Catholic nuns. Well, over the weekend, K-pop sensation New Jeans launched a new Instagram page called Jeans for Free. The new account has now gained 2.4 million followers. It's still unknown whether the breakout quintet will rebrand to Jeans. This comes amid escalating tensions between the group and their label. In November, New Jeans announced their decision to terminate their contracts with their agency Adore in an unprecedented move in the K-pop industry. During their live, New Jeans reassured their fans not to be worried as they navigate a turbulent time. Finally, as Catholics celebrate their final 9-day novena before Christmas Day, around 70 people in Budapest stripped off to red swimsuits and Santa hats for a run. Braving cold temperatures of just above freezing point, participants ran, cheering and shouting ho 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 across the city center, much to the amusement of locals and tourists. Participation fees go to a children's charity organization. Meanwhile, continuing this season of Santa, Kosovo's capital, Pristina, thousands of people took part in the 9th Santa Claus Marathon with participants dressed as Father Christmas. The marathon, which has become one of the biggest events in December, raises money also for charity. Many soldiers from NATO's peacekeeping mission stationed in the Balkan country also joined in. Finally, in Barcelona, thousands of Father Christmases traded their customary reindeers for motorbikes as they rode through the city's streets. Clad in the traditional red and white attire, motorbike enthusiasts took part in what has become an annual Christmas tradition in the Catalan city. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for joining us. Catch up with us again tomorrow at 10 when we bring you the world in 30 minutes, only on World Newsfeed. Follow the Money comes next. Keep it here on the Bilyonaryo News channel, always on top.